When I saw the large 1980 on the calendar, that was the moment I finally believed I had been reborn. Thinking about what day it was today, I wiped away the tear stains on my face and immediately ran outside to stop Mary. "Don't cancel that train ticket." Mary hesitated. "Emma, are you sure you want to go south for work? You'll be gone for a whole year. You definitely won't be coming back in between." I nodded firmly. "I'm sure." She still looked uncertain. "But your two kids are only 7 years old. Didn't you always say you couldn't bear to leave them? And your in-laws, aren't they in poor health? They need you to take care of them. And what about your husband? Do you think Ryan will agree?" My throat tightened at the mention of Ryan. I knew exactly how outstanding he was. Everyone told me to hold on to him and never let go. In my past life, I did just that. And look where it got me. So this time, as I looked into Mary's eyes, I nodded without hesitation. Seeing this, she smiled in relief. "It's good that you've come around. Honestly, I've always thought you were hardworking, capable, and smart. If you hadn't been stuck at home, you could have achieved something great." Tears welled up in my eyes, but I smiled and nodded, gripping the train ticket tightly. My emotions were in turmoil. In just 8 days, I would finally leave. In my past life, when we were younger, my neighbor Mary once went south and came back telling me about the opportunities and rapid development there. It stirred something in me, and I wanted to take a chance too. She even asked a friend to stand in line and buy 2 train tickets. But when I casually mentioned it at home, my in-laws immediately cut me off with cold faces. "A woman running off like that? What nonsense." My mother-in-law snapped. "Emma, don't follow those reckless women. A good woman should stay home, take care of her husband, children, and in-laws. That's what being a good wife means." So, the words I had been about to say never left my lips. When Mary came over with the train ticket, I had no choice but to refuse. But at least this time, I was still in time to change my fate. When I returned home, my twin sons were playing in the yard, digging in the dirt. The moment they saw me, they didn't even call me Mom. They just shouted that they were hungry and told me to hurry up and cook. Hearing her precious grandsons complain about hunger, my mother-in-law rushed out of the house. "Emma, where have you been? Look at the time. Why haven't you started cooking yet? Do you want my darling grandsons to starve?" But this time, I didn't obey like I used to. "I don't feel well. I'm going to lie down." Without waiting for a response, I turned and shut the bedroom door, ignoring her shocked expression. In my past life, I always felt unworthy of Ryan. He was well-educated, while I had only married him thanks to an old childhood engagement. He was sharp-minded, and when the country opened up, he seized business opportunities and became one of the first people to earn a fortune. The neighbors envied me for marrying such a successful man. My in-laws constantly reminded me how lucky I was and told me to be grateful. So, in my past life, I worked tirelessly, never complaining. In the Carter family, I was not just a wife and mother. I was also a daughter-in-law, a maid, a caretaker. I served everyone. But the money Ryan made, the wealth and convenience that came with his success, I barely got to enjoy any of it. It all went to his precious younger sister, Linda. Ryan's younger brother had passed away a few years earlier, leaving behind Linda and her son. Linda was the family's beloved princess. My 2 sons adored her, my in-laws cherished her. Even my husband Ryan favored her. I endured it all, gritted my teeth, and kept taking care of them. But I never expected that when I finally fell ill and collapsed, when my sons were already in college, they would come to my bedside and tell me, "Mom, stop holding on. Even if you survive this illness, you'll only live another couple of years. Dad and Aunt Linda have sacrificed so much because of you. Just let them be together now." I lay there, breathing through an oxygen mask, staring at them as silent tears fell. These were the sons I had raised with my own hands. I had given them everything. And yet, they were waiting for me to die. They must have forgotten. The father they so respected, the one who built his business empire, had emptied our family's entire savings for his startup. And when they were starving, crying from hunger, it was me, begging for food to keep them alive. I had borrowed food from others just to keep them fed and alive. When they were sick, I was the one who stayed up day and night to care for them. The schools in our county were terrible, and I begged Ryan for so long, pleading with him to send the children to study in the city. But he refused. I had no choice but to take the children and plead with an old teacher from our hometown, and only then were they able to go. But they forgot all of that. The only thing they remembered was that the father who had been absent their entire childhood was now wealthy. And so, in regret and bitterness, I closed my eyes for the last time. Luckily, I've been given a second chance. When I walked out of the bedroom, the food was already set on the table. From the kitchen, a young woman emerged, dressed stylishly and looking beautiful. It was Linda. She ignored me completely, placed a dish of braised beans on the table, and took off her apron. At that moment, Ryan also returned home. Linda's lips curved into a smile. "Ryan, you're back." My mother-in-law also came out of her room. The moment she saw me, she let out a cold snort, her tone sharp with sarcasm. "Oh, now that it's time to eat, you decide to show up? How lazy can you be? Pretending to be sick just to get out of cooking?" Ryan glanced at me, his brows furrowing slightly. I didn't say a word and simply sat down. Linda smiled, trying to smooth things over. "It's okay, I don't mind cooking." But my mother-in-law wasn't willing to let it go. "Emma, look at Linda. She's educated, she understands things. Unlike you, petty, greedy, and lazy." I didn't even look at her as I calmly scooped myself a bowl of rice. I suppose I just wasn't as lucky as Linda, marrying a good husband so I don't have to lift a finger. My words caught everyone off guard. Even Ryan looked at me with an unreadable expression. Wasn't it true? Both of us were daughters-in-law of the Carter family. Yet Linda never had to lift a finger after she married in, while I had to take care of the old, the young, and cook for the entire family. No one ever appreciated my hard work. So why should I keep enduring it? My mother-in-law, furious that I had talked back, was about to slam the table and yell when Ryan stopped her. In this household, Ryan's word was final. Even my mother-in-law had to watch his reaction. Since he didn't allow her to continue, she had no choice but to suppress her anger. The meal continued. My 2 sons and Linda's child must have sensed the tension because they ate quietly. After dinner, I naturally didn't wash the dishes. I simply got up and returned to my room. I hadn't expected Ryan to follow me. He stood there, staring at me for a long time before finally sighing. "I know you've had a hard time all these years. Once I make more money, you'll have a better life." I looked at his young face. Ryan was undeniably handsome, tall, and strong. Time had treated him well. Even years later, he was still a refined and elegant man. Not like me, who had spent years working tirelessly, neglecting myself. By middle age, I had already looked worn and exhausted. I took a deep breath and met his gaze. "You've already made quite a bit of money now. Just give me $200 more each month, and I'll be able to live a comfortable life." Ryan's expression changed instantly. "Didn't I already tell you? That money has a purpose. It's not meant to be spent yet." "Oh, is that purpose buying Linda a wool coat?" I sneered at him. A few days ago, Linda had been flaunting a brand new red wool coat, deliberately walking past me several times before accidentally letting it slip that Ryan had bought it for her. That coat alone could have covered our family's food expenses for 2 whole months. Seeing that I knew about it, Ryan instinctively rubbed his nose, looking guilty. But his tone remained firm. "Emma, don't compare yourself to Linda. Her husband is gone. We should take extra care of her. You're her sister-in-law, like a mother figure to her." His shamelessness made me laugh. "A mother figure?" I scoffed. "She already has a child of her own, and you're telling me to treat her like my child?" Then I stared at him coldly. "Ryan, have you ever treated your actual children this well? While you're buying Linda luxury coats, your own sons and I are here eating scraps, barely able to afford meat. Yet somehow, he had the money to buy clothes for Linda." Ryan's face twisted as if I had struck a nerve, and his voice rose slightly. "Emma, stop making a scene." A knock at the door quickly interrupted us. Ryan took a deep breath, suppressing his anger, and went to open it. Standing outside was Linda. She looked concerned, her voice soft and gentle. "Ryan, Emma, were you two arguing?" She glanced at Ryan's dark expression before quickly adding, "Is it about dinner? If you don't want to cook, I can do it from now on. There's no need to fight over it." Before Ryan could respond, I spoke first. "Great, from now on, you can take care of all the cooking." Linda's expression froze. She clearly hadn't expected me to agree, especially right in front of Ryan. After all, I had always been the perfect, accommodating wife in the past. But I ignored her shock, brushed past her, and walked into the courtyard, leaving the 2 of them alone. I heated some water and washed up before heading to bed. The next morning, I woke up a little later than usual. Ryan was already gone. I reached for the train ticket I had hidden away, my fingers gently tracing over the date printed on it. Only 7 days left until I could finally leave. Carefully, I put it back in its place and walked out of the bedroom. To my surprise, there was a plate of warm steamed buns and a bowl of millet porridge on the dining table. Ryan stepped out of the kitchen and smiled at me. "Emma, come wash up and have breakfast. Mom already took the kids to school." I looked at him suspiciously. He had never been this thoughtful before. But who would refuse food? I sat down and started eating. Ryan kept watching me, waiting for the right moment to speak. Only when I finished my meal and got up to leave did he finally say, "Emma, I want to talk to you about something." Seeing his expression, I had a feeling I knew what was coming. Sure enough, his next words confirmed it. "It's about the apartment in the city. I was thinking we could let Linda and her son move in." Though he phrased it like a suggestion, I knew him well enough to understand that his mind was already made up. That's exactly how it had happened in my past life. Back then, Ryan had told me that Linda and her son had a hard life. He said the courtyard house in town was too small, that it was too cramped for everyone to live together. He also said the dormitory where Linda stayed wasn't ideal. It wasn't a stable place for a child. There was no kitchen for her to cook, and if she rented a place on her own, a ground floor house wouldn't be safe for a mother and child. He went on, making it sound like the apartment was the only suitable place for Linda and her son. Ryan had promised me he would earn more money soon and buy an even better home for us. That was the first time in my past life that I had ever opposed him. For one, our children had already started first grade, but the schools in town weren't great. I had never had the chance to study much, and I desperately wanted my kids to get a good education. Moving to the city would have allowed them to attend better schools. Secondly, safety in town was a real issue. Ryan was always away for work, leaving behind an elderly mother, 2 small children, and me, a young woman. I had spent countless nights terrified, clutching a hammer behind the door as drunkards pounded on it, too scared to sleep. When Ryan first told me he had bought an apartment in the city and planned to move us there, I had been overjoyed. I had finally felt like our struggles were paying off. But then, out of nowhere, he decided to give it to Linda. I had objected, and Ryan had been furious. By the end of our fight, he had thrown down the cold, crushing words. "I earned the money, I bought the apartment, I decide who lives there." That sentence had left me heartbroken and ashamed. I had no way to argue against it. After all, I had no money of my own. If I had a choice, I would have wanted to earn my own money, to spend it without depending on anyone, without having to bow my head and beg. Now, standing in front of Ryan as he repeated the same arguments, I no longer felt the excitement I once had. I looked at him calmly and repeated the same reasoning I had given in my past life. As expected, Ryan's face immediately showed impatience. "Emma, you're the eldest sister-in-law. Why are you fighting with Linda and using the kids as an excuse?" I let out a cold laugh. "Fighting? Have you ever seen a woman fight with her sister-in-law over her own husband? Do you think this is some kind of arrangement where 2 women share a man?" Ryan's expression darkened instantly, and he shot up from his seat. "Emma, watch your words. What do you mean by fighting over a husband? I'm her older brother. It's my responsibility to take care of her." I smirked at his defensiveness. "Why are you getting so worked up? I never said I disagreed." His anger faltered. He had clearly been expecting a fight, and now that I had suddenly agreed, he seemed momentarily unsure of what to say. I didn't bother explaining further. I stood up to leave, but he quickly blocked my path. "Where are you going?" I pushed him aside. "That's none of your business. Just focus on taking care of Linda." Ignoring his frustrated expression, I grabbed my red Forever bicycle and rode off. When Ryan married me, he hadn't spent a single penny. His parents had told him that since I had no living parents, there was no need for things like a bride price or wedding gifts. "There's no need to be so formal," they said. "Once she marries in, she'll be our daughter." I was an orphan. I had no one to prepare a dowry for me. Before getting married, I sold the few livestock I had left from my old home, used the money to buy myself a pair of gold earrings and a ring. That was all I had to my name. 6 months later, when Ryan ran into financial trouble with his business, I didn't hesitate. I sold those gold pieces, the ones I had never even worn, and gave him every cent to help him through. Now that I was preparing to head south, I knew I needed money. So, I sold off what little jewelry I had left. It wasn't much, but at least it would be enough to get by if I couldn't find a job right away. By the time I got back home, it was nearly noon. The moment I walked in, I saw Linda sitting in the living room, eyes red like she had been crying. My mother-in-law slammed the table the moment she saw me. "So you still know how to come home? If you had stayed out any longer, I would have called the police to have you arrested. You can guard against thieves all you want, but who knew the real thief would be in our own house? Emma, how dare you steal from your own family?" Linda quickly stepped in, gently patting my mother-in-law's back to calm her down, while also dabbing at her own tears. She turned to me with a sorrowful expression. "Emma, if you have a problem with me, you can just say so. Why do this?" Before I could respond, the front door opened. Ryan had just returned. Seeing Linda's teary face, she immediately turned to him with a choked-up voice. "Ryan, you're back," he frowned. "What's going on?" My mother-in-law shot me a glare. "Ask your wife what she's done." My father-in-law, usually silent, smacked his cane against the floor, his face red with anger. Ryan turned to me, his impatience clear. Without even asking for my side of the story, he jumped straight to a conclusion. "Emma, how long are you going to keep making a fuss about the apartment?" At the mention of the apartment, Linda subtly glanced at me, her expression unreadable. After listening to their accusations for a while, I finally understood what this was about. It was because I had taken the Forever bicycle. That bicycle was the first expensive item Ryan had bought for the family after making money. Unlike the usual black 28-inch heavy-duty bikes, this one was smaller, bright red, clearly meant for a woman. He had called it a gift for me. The neighbors all said I had married well, that my husband treated me well. But the truth? I had never even ridden it once. Linda worked at a cafeteria in a factory. It wasn't far, just a 10-minute walk, but she always acted so fragile, claiming she was exhausted after every shift. So, from the day Ryan bought the bicycle, he decided she should use it. Over time, she had come to see it as her own. No one else was allowed to touch it. Today, she had taken the morning off to visit a friend, planning to ride the bike to work after lunch, only to find that it was gone. After asking around, she learned that I had taken it. With no choice left, she had to walk to work looking pitiful as she did. And the moment she got back, she ran straight to my mother-in-law, crying her eyes out. Now that I understood what all the commotion was about, I couldn't help but find it ridiculous. I smiled at Linda. "Is the bicycle yours?" She hesitated for a moment, instinctively shaking her head, but quickly added, "But I've been the one using it this whole time, and I need it for work. You took it on purpose just to make things difficult for me." I glanced at Ryan, who was already itching to speak up in her defense, but I beat him to it. "My husband bought that bicycle. Do I not even have the right to ride it once?" Ryan's words caught in his throat. I kept my gaze steady on him as I continued, my voice calm. "Ryan, tell me, was this bicycle bought specifically for Linda? If it was, then I won't touch it again." Ryan pressed his lips together, momentarily looking dazed. Maybe he was remembering what he had said back when he first brought the bicycle home. "Emma, you've been through a lot with me these past few years. This is for you. In the future, whatever others have, I'll make sure you have too." Ryan met my eyes, then finally let out a sigh and turned to my mother-in-law and Linda. "The bike was originally bought for Emma. It's fine if she rides it once in a while." My mother-in-law, though unwilling, would never go against her son's words. She merely let out a discontented huff. But Linda's expression was another story. She clearly hadn't expected this to end so quickly. She must have thought Ryan would scold me on her behalf. I glanced at the untouched kitchen and smirked. "By the way, Linda, yesterday you said from now on, you'd be responsible for cooking. Does that still stand?" Linda's lips parted as if to argue, but she hesitated. She looked at my mother-in-law, then at Ryan, and in the end, she had no choice but to nod stiffly. "Of course." I returned to my room and carefully tucked away the money I had gotten from selling my jewelry. Just as I finished, Ryan followed me in. I ignored him and continued folding my clothes, but I wasn't expecting him to suddenly wrap his arms around me from behind. "Emma?" he murmured. I instinctively pulled away, putting distance between us, my eyes filled with wariness. Ryan looked awkward, his lips slightly pursed. In the past, I used to love these rare moments of affection. Even the smallest touch, a simple handhold, would make my heart race like a newlywed bride. But this was the first time I recoiled from him as if he were poison. He frowned. "Emma, what's going on with you lately? You're acting so distant, always coming and going. What are you up to?" "Nothing." I replied, not bothering to meet his confused gaze. I pushed the door open and walked out. By the time I reached the dining table, Linda had already regained her composure. She even took the initiative to serve me a bowl of porridge, looking as if she was in a good mood. I had already noticed earlier that she and her son had packed 2 small suitcases. They were preparing to move. Linda had a dormitory at the factory where she worked, but after living there for a while, she claimed the conditions were poor and moved back to our home. The old house wasn't big, and their room was just as small. But now that they were about to move into the apartment in the city, of course, she was happy. In my past life, after they moved, Linda's son was transferred to a school in the city. I had envied them. Because I had never had the chance to study, I placed great importance on my children's education. Even though my 2 sons disliked how strict I was, I still pushed them to take their studies seriously. That was why, later on, I had pulled every string I could to get them into city schools. But this time, I wasn't going to be the one paving the way. As we were eating, I suddenly spoke. Ethan, Eric, do you know that we won't be moving into the apartment in the city? The dining table fell into an instant silence. Ryan's face darkened. Why are you bringing this up to the kids? I met his gaze calmly. They should know. In my past life, when my sons learned that they couldn't move into the city, they had been filled with disappointment. I had been afraid they would resent Ryan, so I had even helped explain things on his behalf. This time, I wouldn't do that. Since Ryan and Linda had such a good relationship, he could explain it to them himself. I looked at my sons and said, your dad is giving the apartment to your aunt and cousin. Oh, and by the way, their son will be transferring to a school in the city. But you 2 won't have that chance. The moment they heard this, my 2 sons immediately protested. Linda's face turned pale, and soon she started subtly wiping away tears. Whenever she was at an advantage, she always played the victim. She didn't reject it outright. Instead, she just waited for me to back down on my own. Maybe my recent changes had made Ryan uneasy, because this time he didn't dare to say forget it. He didn't refuse, nor did he try to stop the kids from making a fuss. He just sat there silently, letting them throw a tantrum, while he quietly shed tears, acting as if he had suffered some enormous grievance. Ryan finally lost his patience, slamming his chopsticks down in frustration. Enough. Both of you, be quiet. Your aunt has a hard enough time raising her son alone. How many times have I told you to be considerate of him? I ignored the entire spectacle, calmly continuing my meal. These were the same 2 children who, in my past life, had told me to die so their father and aunt could finally be together in peace. Since they had chosen to accept their father's decisions, I had no reason to concern myself with them anymore. The truth had already been laid out for them. If they lost their chance to attend a better school in the city, at least they would know exactly who was responsible for that outcome. But, to my surprise, they were much easier to pacify than I had expected. Maybe it was because they already liked Linda so much. The moment she started crying, they immediately quieted down. Or maybe Ryan had convinced them with a few sentimental words, persuading that it was the right thing to do. Not only did they stop complaining, but they even turned on me. Ethan looked at me with disapproval. Mom, are you trying to turn us against Aunt Linda? Eric frowned. Aunt Linda isn't in good health. It makes sense for her to live in the apartment. Mom, you're being too petty. I looked at them and smiled coldly. Just remember what you're saying today. I fought for you, but I lost. You lost your chance to go to school in the city, and it was your choice to give it up. Their faces instantly darkened. Mom, you don't know anything. We don't want to talk to you anymore. We're going to play with Aunt Linda. I no longer felt any sadness over them. In my past life, I had given them everything, sacrificed everything, and they had repaid me with betrayal. This time, I wouldn't waste my energy. I took out my train ticket again, staring at it. The day was coming soon. The day before my departure, Ryan was packing his bags as well. He was heading out of town again for business. Based on past experience, he would probably be gone for another 6 months. Normally, I was the one who packed his things for him in advance, but this time, I didn't bother, and surprisingly, he didn't ask me to. He quietly packed his own bags, even going out of his way to heat a kettle of water for me. When he saw me about to leave, he suddenly spoke. Emma, I want to talk to you about something. I paused. Something clicked in my mind, and I immediately understood why he had been acting so unusually thoughtful today. Sure enough, his next words confirmed my suspicion. Uncle Jean found a job for you in the city, didn't he? Ryan said. I've been thinking about it, and I don't think it's suitable for you. He rattled off a long list of reasons: how we lived in the county, how commuting to the city would be inconvenient. There were only 2 buses running between here and the city each day, and traveling back and forth would be exhausting. And, of course, if I took the job, I wouldn't be able to take care of the family properly. His voice softened with supposed sincerity. This family needs you, Emma. I'm making money. You don't have to struggle like that. I laughed coldly. And what does you making money have to do with me? Have you ever given me any of it? Ryan froze, momentarily speechless. Then, as if trying to salvage the situation, he quickly said, this time, my business trip should bring in about 10,000. If everything goes well, I'll give all the money to you, and you can decide how to use it. Seeing that I remained indifferent, he added, you can spend it however you like. Buy yourself new shoes, a wool coat. I won't say a word about it. I let out a quiet scoff. If this had been my past life, I probably would have been moved to tears, willing to work myself to the bone for his family all over again. But after dying once, how could I still be fooled by his words? I didn't look at him anymore. Instead, I shifted my gaze away and said, all right, then I want to draft an agreement. You need to sign it, I said. Ryan was clearly surprised, and a flicker of dissatisfaction crossed his face, likely because he felt I didn't trust him. But since he had already made the promise, he had no choice but to agree. If this is what it takes for you to believe me, then fine, I'll sign it. I immediately went back to the room, found a sheet of stationery, and started writing. Not long after, I came out with 2 sheets of paper, flipping up the corner of the second page. Sign here. Ryan didn't even glance at the contents. He picked up the pen and quickly scrawled his name. Happy now? Seeing that I seemed relieved, he relaxed as well. I carefully put the papers away, just as Ryan continued, you should let Uncle Jang know that you won't be taking the job. I paused for a moment and looked straight at him. You said the job wasn't suitable for me. Then who is it suitable for? Ryan averted his gaze, avoiding eye contact. I just think, since you're not taking it, it'd be a waste. So why not let Linda have it? She's moving to the city anyway. After he finished speaking, he anxiously watched my reaction, probably afraid I would get angry and take back my agreement. But I remained unnervingly calm. I'll go tell Uncle Jang that I won't be taking the job, I said. But I won't let Linda have it either. Ryan chuckled, reaching out as if to pull me into a hug. Emma, I'm so lucky to have such an understanding wife. I nearly gagged in disgust. Dodging his embrace, I turned and walked straight out. At that time, there weren't many places where I could make a copy of a document. I ran around to several shops before finally finding one. When I stepped out of the store, I had 2 copies of a divorce agreement in my hands. What I had just tricked Ryan into signing was a divorce paper. In this era, divorce was simple. With a signed agreement, all I had to do was take it to the relevant office and get it officially stamped, and our marriage would be legally over. I then went to visit Uncle Zhang. He was an old neighbor from my hometown, later moving to the city for work. Now that he was older, he had retired and moved back to the county. He had watched me grow up and always felt sorry for my situation. So whenever he came across a good opportunity, he would think of me first. Factory jobs were in high demand at this time. Every position was valuable. One vacancy meant one lucky person could get in, but many others would be left out. As soon as Uncle Zhang found an opening, he had immediately thought of me. In my past life, I had let him down. The moment Ryan convinced me otherwise, I had foolishly given up the job and even recommended Linda for it instead. This time, I was already preparing to leave, so I wouldn't take the job. But that didn't mean I would let Linda benefit from it. I politely declined the offer and recommended someone else instead. Not knowing how long I would be gone, I spent a long time chatting with Uncle Zhang before heading home. By the time I returned, Ryan had already left. Just like every other time he left, there was nothing special about his departure. Except for one thing. This time, he had left me a letter. It was filled with affectionate words. He wrote that he understood my concerns about Linda, but assured me that he had no improper thoughts about her. He claimed he was only looking after them on behalf of his late brother, hoping that by doing so, his brother's soul would rest in peace. He also promised to work hard and make more money so I could live a better life. I read the letter with a blank expression before tossing it aside. I had long since become immune to this kind of empty sentiment. On my last night before leaving, I went to my children's room. The moment they saw me enter, their faces stiffened, and they quickly hid something behind their backs. But I had already seen it. It was a birthday card. Linda's birthday was coming up. They had never given me anything. Not once. But they had never forgotten Linda's birthday. I stared at them for a long moment before finally smiling. In my past life, I had given everything to them. But this time, I owed them nothing. Early the next morning, I dragged out my suitcase, already packed in advance. Before walking out the door, I placed a copy of the signed divorce agreement on the table. I left the place that had trapped me for half my life and headed to the train station. Mary was already there, and when she saw me, she waved excitedly. "Emma! I was so afraid you wouldn't come." I smiled. How could I not? Once the time came, we boarded the southbound train. What I didn't know was that, after I left, chaos erupted in the Carter household. Early that morning, Linda, who had already moved to the city, came rushing back on her bicycle, crying. She sobbed that she had lost her factory job slot. Since Ryan had told her I had given up the position, she assumed it automatically belonged to her. She had even boasted to the neighbors about it. But when she went to the factory, she found out the position had already been filled. Worse, she knew the person who got it. It was another neighbor from our old community. Furious, she stormed back to complain to my mother-in-law. Just as she was whining about how I would rather let an outsider benefit than help family, she finally realized I wasn't home. That was when they found the copy of the divorce agreement in my room, along with a short note I had left behind. "I have decided to divorce Ryan. Don't bother looking for me." My mother-in-law collapsed onto the floor, wailing and pounding her legs in grief, cursing me for being heartless. Linda, on the other hand, barely concealed the joy on her face. But none of that had anything to do with me anymore. At that moment, I had already arrived in Jishi. The atmosphere in this city was completely different from back home. It was full of energy, open-minded and modern, people dressed in stylish and trendy clothing. There were countless job opportunities, unlike my hometown, where you had to fight for a single factory position. Here, small factories were everywhere. The moment we got off the train, a woman approached us. "You two just arrived, right? Looking for work? My factory needs workers. You both seem like honest people. Why don't you come work for me?" The woman was older, with a warm and friendly smile. She spoke directly and confidently, asking all the right questions, as if she could read our minds. Mary was about to answer, but I discreetly tugged at her hand and spoke first. "No, we're here to visit relatives." Then, without giving the woman a chance to say more, I pulled Mary away quickly. Once we had walked a fair distance, Mary asked, "Emma, why did we leave so suddenly? Weren't we looking for jobs?" I explained. That woman was watching us for a long time. It was obvious from our clothes and luggage that we weren't from here. That makes us easy targets. More importantly, even though there are a lot of factories here, they don't hire people right off the street like that. Most still require interviews. And besides, I've heard rumors before. Mary's eyes widened. "Rumors?" I nodded. At this time, Jishi has a lot of scams targeting newcomers. These people know that workers from small towns are inexperienced and desperate to find jobs. And back home, people are still too naive, unlike in the future, when everyone is more street smart. Right now, most people wouldn't even think of questioning someone who offers them a job so readily. I continued in a low voice. Some of these scams trick people into working in abusive, exploitative factories. Others lure young women into brothels. Some even kidnap people and sell them off to remote villages as brides. We just got here. It's better to be cautious. Hearing that, Mary nodded in agreement. "Emma, you're really smart. I wouldn't have thought of that." We were about to leave the station when we noticed the same woman approaching a young man. This time, she had changed her approach. "Hey, young man, you're not here for work, are you? You must be a student." The young man had delicate features, fair skin, and wore glasses. He looked polite and well-educated, clearly not someone who came for a factory job. Seeing him nod slightly, the woman's smile grew wider. "I knew it. You look like a scholar. Which school are you going to?" The young man seemed a little shy, but still responded politely. "Jishi University." The woman's face lit up. "Oh my, what a coincidence. My son goes there too. He's a freshman in the chemistry department. I was just about to visit him. Why don't you come with me? I'll give you a ride." The young man looked a little startled by her enthusiasm and quickly shook his head. Thank you, ma'am, but that won't be necessary. No need to trouble yourself. I can go alone, the young man said politely. But the woman was strong, and she forcefully pulled him forward a couple of steps. I watched everything unfold. In an unfamiliar city, I hadn't planned on meddling in someone else's business. But this young man was a college student. His future was bright. If he ended up being tricked and sold into a black market factory where he'd be trapped for life, his entire future would be ruined. I hesitated for a moment before making my decision. Pulling Mary along, I quickly stepped forward, blocking the woman's path. Then I turned to the young man and called out naturally, "There you are. What took you so long? The train arrived ages ago." I gestured for him to follow me. The young man was stunned for a second, but quickly caught on. He pulled his arm free, grabbed his luggage, and hurried to my side. Without hesitation, I subtly tugged at the hem of his sleeve and led all three of us away from the train station. I didn't relax until we had walked a fair distance, putting plenty of space between us and the woman. The young man, panting from the sudden rush, still managed to express his gratitude. "Thank you. If you hadn't stepped in, I don't think I would have been able to break free." He admitted that, eventually, he had sensed something was off. The woman's enthusiasm was excessive. But by the time he realized it, her grip on his arm was too strong, and he wasn't physically strong enough to shake her off. "My family actually warned me to be careful of human traffickers," he added, "but it never crossed my mind that I'd actually run into one." Curious, I asked, "Why did you trust me so easily? Weren't you afraid I was part of the scam too?" I had been surprised by how naturally he had followed me without hesitation. The young man chuckled, his bright eyes filled with sincerity. "The moment I saw you, I knew you were a good person. Your eyes were full of concern, just like my family's when they look at me." I couldn't help but smile at his innocence. "You should still be more cautious in the future." He was too naive. Even though he had sensed something was wrong, he hadn't called for help. I reminded him, "Next time something like this happens, shout for help. Don't hesitate just because you're embarrassed." His face flushed slightly as he nodded. "Got it." We exchanged names. His name was Jack Yeager, a freshman majoring in history at Jishi University. After that, we parted ways. Time passed quickly. Mary and I had now been in Jishi for 6 months. During that time, we had worked at a garment factory and managed to save up a decent amount of money. We had also become more familiar with how things worked in the city. By the end of the year, Mary decided to return home. When she learned that I wasn't planning on going back, she sighed. "Well, just take care of yourself. We'll meet again after the new year." After seeing Mary off, I returned to the small place I had been renting to spend the holiday. Since the factory had shut down for the season, I could no longer stay in the company dormitory. With more free time on my hands, I finally started executing my business plan. I began by collecting discarded fabric scraps from the garment factory. Then, I bought a sewing machine and started making canvas tote bags. At this time, the economy was booming and foreign brands were starting to enter the market. Leather bags were popular, but many young people couldn't afford them. Their options were limited. That's when I realized I could use this opportunity to start my business. Since the garment factory threw away so much fabric, I essentially had free raw materials. This meant I didn't need much investment, just time and effort. The thought of it filled me with excitement. Outside the university campus, a group of young girls gathered around me. "Big sis, I'll take one for 50 cents. "No, take my money first." I smiled unhurried. "Relax, one at a time." Within minutes, all 20 bags I had brought were sold out. Canvas and tote bags were the perfect size for students to carry their books, so they were immediately interested the moment I introduced them. College students loved to spend money, and they were also the most open to new trends. Once something became popular, it spread fast. That's why I had chosen to target them. After pocketing the earnings, I was preparing to leave when I suddenly heard someone call out, "Emma." I turned around and saw a young man running toward me. For a moment, I was dazed. Then I finally remembered who he was. It was none other than Jack Yeager, the young man I had helped at the train station when I first arrived in Jishi. 6 months had passed, and he no longer looked as frail as before. "It really is you, Emma," he exclaimed excitedly. "I almost didn't recognize you." I glanced down at my own appearance and smiled slightly. It was true, I had changed a lot in the past 6 months. The biggest difference was that the lifeless expression I once carried was now completely gone. Jack suddenly turned around and called out, "Uncle, this is the woman who saved me back then." Curious, I looked in the direction he was facing. A tall man slowly approached. His features were sharp and refined, carrying the scholarly elegance of an intellectual. Yet at the same time, there was an undeniable air of dignity about him. Something that felt almost aristocratic. After a brief introduction, I learned that Jack's uncle was James Yeager, a professor at Jishi University who had recently returned from studying abroad. The university had hired him at a high salary as an associate professor. When Jack had reunited with his uncle and told him what had nearly happened to him at the train station, he realized just how close he had come to being trafficked. He had been terrified afterward, regretting that he hadn't been able to properly thank me. Unfortunately, since we hadn't exchanged contact information, he had assumed we would never meet again. Now that we had run into each other, Jack beamed. "Let us treat you to a meal." He was full of enthusiasm, but I felt a little uneasy. James Yeager was an intimidating presence. His demeanor made people instinctively keep their distance. Feeling uncomfortable, I declined, using the excuse that I had things to do. However, Jack was persistent, so in the end, I gave them the address of my business. When Jack learned that I was selling fabric bags, he eagerly volunteered to help spread the word. Throughout the conversation, James stood off to the side, a faint smile lingering on his lips as he listened. I thanked Jack with a smile and said, "I'll be going now." After saying goodbye, I glanced at James one last time. He gave me a small nod in acknowledgement. I quickly looked away and left. A few days later, after finishing a delivery near the university, I never expected to run into Ryan Carter. He was just as surprised to see me. For a moment, he stood still, as if processing what he was seeing. Then he walked toward me. "What are you doing here?" He studied me for a few seconds before realization struck. "You really came out here to work? This is ridiculous." Only then did I learn that after I had left the divorce papers behind, my mother-in-law had somehow managed to get in touch with Ryan. She had been furious, speaking in circles, unable to properly explain the situation. All she had told him was that I had left him a letter and disappeared. At the time, he had been too busy with business to listen carefully. To him, my running away to work was just a childish tantrum. He had assumed I had either gone back to the countryside or found a temporary job in the city. It had never once crossed his mind that I would go as far as Jishi. Now, looking at me, he sighed in exasperation. "Forget it. As long as you're safe, that's all that matters. Just think of these past 6 months as a little break. I'm heading back the day after tomorrow. You should come home with me." He still thought I was just throwing a fit. He reached out, as if to take my hand. "Emma, you're getting more and more stubborn. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is out here? Aren't you afraid something will happen to you?" I immediately pulled away, my expression cold. Only then did Ryan notice the distant indifference in my gaze. For a moment, we stood there in silence, locked in a quiet standoff. In the end, Ryan gave in first. His voice softened, as if coaxing me. "I made a lot of money this time. Like I promised, all of it is yours. Whatever you want to buy, we can buy it now. Jishi is full of things we don't have back home." He thought that by backing down this much, I would follow his lead. After all, in the past, I was always the one to compromise. But he was wrong. The woman I was now had no intention of backing down. I shook my head. "No need. I can earn my own money. If I want to buy something, I'll buy it myself. I don't need to ask anyone for it." Ryan's expression darkened. "We're husband and wife. Why are you acting like you're asking for a favor?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Oh, but isn't that exactly what it is? I was never like Linda. I never got anything from you without having to fight for it." His expression became complicated. "You're still holding on to that. Didn't I already explain in my letter there's nothing between Linda and me?" At the mention of the letter, I met his gaze head on. "Before you left, what I had you sign wasn't a promise," I said calmly. "It was a divorce agreement." Ryan stared at me, completely unwilling to believe what he had just heard. His voice nearly broke as he questioned me. "Why?" I met his gaze, unwavering. "I admit, over the years, you've been busy with work and not often home. I've endured a lot. But weren't you doing it all for this family?" I didn't hesitate to refute him. "To be precise, you were doing it for yourself and for Linda." "Don't put that label on me. I never got anything out of it." Ryan was so frustrated by my words that he let out a bitter laugh. "Linda, again, why do you keep bringing her up? She's my sister-in-law." That will never change. He could say it 1,000 or even 10,000 times, but in a time when money dictated everything, love followed wherever the money went. And the money had never been with me. Naturally, neither had his love. Ryan stared at me, dumbfounded, but I had no intention of continuing this conversation. I turned to leave. He grabbed my wrist. Emma, no matter what, we've been husband and wife. How can you just say divorce and be done with it? Come home with me first. I struggled to pull free, refusing to go with him. As we wrestled, a voice suddenly called out from a distance. Let go of Emma. I turned to see Jack Yeager running toward us, trying to pry Ryan's hand off my wrist, but Jack was too thin and weak to make a difference. Ryan, are you some kind of creep? Jack shouted. Harassing a woman in front of a university, do you have no shame? Ryan frowned, his face darkening. Who are you? Then, remembering how Jack had called me Emma, he turned to me with narrowed eyes. You know him? I ignored him, only repeating, let go. The commotion was starting to attract attention. People were beginning to stop and watch. Before things could escalate further, a large hand suddenly gripped Ryan's wrist. I followed the movement and looked up. It was James Yeager. He was wearing a white button-down shirt, the sleeves rolled up just enough to reveal his firm, muscular forearms. The veins stood out slightly from the force he was using. His voice was cold, leaving no room for argument. Let go. Ryan's expression twisted as pain shot through his wrist. He finally loosened his grip on me. Jack quickly pulled me behind him protectively. Even when Ryan declared that he was my husband, Jack didn't back down. Even if you're married, you should still talk things out properly. No one has the right to grab someone like that. I corrected him. Ex-husband. Ryan blurted out. I don't agree to the divorce. I cut him off coldly. You already signed the papers. That was a trick. You tricked me into signing. Ryan shouted, but he was at a loss for words. He had no way to explain himself. Now separated by the two men in front of me, he could only stand there, looking at me with desperation. He couldn't understand how things had come to this. Our life had been fine, wasn't it? He was making more and more money. Why did it have to end like this? Was I really leaving him just because of Linda? I was already growing impatient, wanting him to leave. But out of the corner of my eye, I noticed James Yeager watching me intently. His gaze was dark and unreadable. And when I looked back at him, he didn't avoid eye contact. His deep eyes held something heavy, something I couldn't quite decipher. My heart skipped a beat. Eventually, Ryan had no choice but to leave. The moment he was gone, I turned to James and Jack, expressing my gratitude. Let me treat you two to a meal. Jack immediately waved his hands. No way, I owe you a meal, not the other way around. Seeing that I was about to refuse, Jack quickly nudged James forward. Besides, my uncle's salary is insanely high. He should be treating us to a fancy dinner. In the end, we went to the best Cantonese restaurant in town. After dinner, both of them even insisted on walking me home. Their kindness made me feel unexpectedly cared for, something I wasn't used to. Before leaving, James handed me a slip of paper. If you ever need anything, he said, call this number. You'll find me. I stared at the string of numbers on the slip of paper, suddenly feeling like it was burning in my hands. But under James Yeager's steady, slightly pressing gaze, I ended up putting it away. I had thought that a man as proud as Ryan Carter, upon learning that I had taken the initiative to divorce him, would storm off in anger and go straight home. But I hadn't expected him to show up outside my door the very next day. He looked haggard, as if he hadn't slept all night. When he saw me, he only asked one thing. Yesterday, I was too emotional and forgot to ask, how have you been these past 6 months? You've never been this far from home before. My lips parted slightly, but in the end, I lowered my gaze. No matter what, it's been better than when I was living with the Carters. At the Carter house, I worked from dawn until midnight, never stopping, like a spinning top wound too tight, constantly turning without rest. I had no time to myself, not even for a single second. And all that work? It was unpaid labor, taken for granted. But here, in Jishi, every bit of effort I put in had a clear price tag. My work was acknowledged and compensated. Ryan's face turned pale at my words, as if he was about to cry. I didn't understand why he looked so hurt. What else had he expected? That my life at the Carter house had been some kind of paradise? Honestly, when I lived alone in my hometown before getting married, I didn't have much to do. I fed the chickens, kept the house in order, and occasionally swept the yard. I didn't eat much. Whatever I grew in the fields was enough to get by. Back then, The neighbors and elders all told me that once I got married, life would be good, that I would finally have someone to rely on, that I could live comfortably. But the reality was that my life had been better before I ever stepped foot into the Carter family. I didn't want to dwell on the past anymore. Looking at Ryan, I spoke calmly. Let's stop tormenting each other. Let's let go. We don't need to interfere in each other's lives anymore. Ryan shook his head. He couldn't accept it. What about the kids? Ethan and Eric, what about them? I remained indifferent. Your mother will take care of them. As for everything else, that's your responsibility as their father. Then I shut the door. I thought that would be the end of it. But to my surprise, Ryan didn't leave. The plans he had made to return home the next day were suddenly forgotten. I knew he was convinced that I was simply being stubborn, that I was only putting up a front. He thought that without him, I was just forcing myself to smile through my suffering. And he believed that as long as he coaxed me, I would eventually soften and go back with him. So when he saw me sewing my own canvas bags and selling them, the look on his face was pure disbelief. As the university was about to go on break, I worked tirelessly to make one last round of sales before the holiday. I had spent days sewing non-stop, preparing a large batch to bring to the campus. After running around all day, I was exhausted and had just sat down on the side of the road to rest when a warm bottle of juice appeared in front of me. I looked up. It was Ryan. His expression was complicated. I didn't take the bottle. Instead, I pulled out my own thermos and took a sip of water. Even though it was a little cold, it felt reassuring to drink. Ryan sat down beside me. After a long moment, he finally spoke. Why put yourself through this? Just come home. I can take care of you. I let out a quiet laugh and slowly peeled a roasted sweet potato. The feeling of stretching out my palm and waiting for someone to hand me money, I never wanted to experience that again. Ryan's face darkened. He looked like he wanted to argue, but in the end, he fell silent. On New Year's Eve, I decided to make dumplings for myself. I also bought some traditional holiday foods that were a must-have for the local celebrations. As I was about to start cooking, I suddenly heard a knock on the door. Curious, I peeked through the gap. To my surprise, it was James Yeager. I hesitated for a moment before opening the door. Professor Yeager, what are you doing here? Hadn't he gone home for the holidays? Both he and Jack weren't locals. Jack had gone home a week ago. I had assumed James had left with him. James lifted the bags in his hands and shook them slightly. Aren't you going to let me in first? Only then did I notice that his hands were full, carrying several bags of groceries. Feeling a little flustered, I quickly stepped aside. Come in. I watched as James Yeager placed the groceries in the kitchen with ease, while I stood stiffly at the side, unsure of what to do. I didn't know if it was because of his high level of education or his naturally reserved personality, but even though we had met multiple times, I still treated him with a certain level of respect rather than familiarity. Unlike Jack, I couldn't speak to him without a second thought. As he unpacked the bags, I finally noticed that he had brought a lot of seafood. Professor Yeager, you really didn't have to. You always call me Professor Yeager, he interrupted, the corners of his lips curving slightly, so faintly that it was almost imperceptible. His deep eyes lingered on me, as if amused. Must we keep things so formal? I suddenly felt nervous. What else should I call you then? I hesitated. By age, I suppose I should call you brother, but you're also Jack's uncle, so wouldn't that be a bit strange? I can't exactly call you Uncle James either. Feeling awkward, I trailed off. Fortunately, he didn't let me struggle with it for long. No need to worry about seniority, just call me normally. I hesitated for a second before finally saying, James. By then, he had already taken off his coat, removed his watch, and set it aside. He started handling the shrimp while casually explaining, I had some urgent matters come up this year, so I couldn't go home. When my family found out, they insisted I bring something to properly thank you. So they all knew about how I had helped Jack. Jack was the only son of his family. His relatives cherished him dearly. Since I had saved him, their gratitude toward me was natural. When they heard I would be spending the new year alone, they worried I wouldn't eat well, so they asked James to bring me food. Seeing that I was about to refuse, James said, these were all given by the university. There's no need to turn them down. Besides, I'll be eating them too. I paused before realizing what he meant. He intended to stay and spend New Year's Eve here. Noticing my dazed expression, he raised an eyebrow. What's wrong? Am I not welcome to join you for the holiday? He had already brought so much food and was even handling the ingredients himself. How could I possibly refuse? I nodded in agreement. Besides, having someone else around for New Year's did make things livelier. I felt embarrassed watching him do all the work alone, so I returned to preparing the dumpling filling. Neither of us were particularly talkative people, so the atmosphere was calm and quiet as we each focused on our tasks. Every now and then, my gaze drifted toward James. He had a habit of keeping his lips pressed into a straight line, giving him a serious look. This was the first time I had observed him so closely. I suddenly realized he had a high, well-defined nose, striking features, and a tall, lean figure. He wasn't as frail as Jack, but he also wasn't overly muscular in an intimidating way. He had the refined elegance of a scholar, but at the same time, there was an air of aloofness and quiet authority about him, a contrast that made him particularly compelling. There was something uniquely captivating about him, yet the coldness in his eyes made people hesitate to get too close. A phrase suddenly surfaced in my mind. He can be admired from afar, but not touched. It was a line from a poem I had once overheard my children recite. Somehow, it suited him perfectly. Lost in thought, I didn't realize he had looked up at me. Our eyes met. Caught red-handed, I quickly lowered my head, my face burning with embarrassment. I thought I even heard a soft chuckle. That only made me feel more humiliated. I wanted nothing more than to find a hole to crawl into. Sensing my awkwardness, James took the initiative to break the silence. What are your plans after the new year? Will you go back to the factory or focus on your business? I didn't hesitate. I'm going to focus on my business. That had been my goal from the start. Working at the garment factory had only been a temporary measure. Back then, I was unfamiliar with the city and lacked capital. But now, I had learned more about the market and saved up some money. It was time to take the next step. James nodded approvingly. That's a good choice. Entrepreneurship is on the rise. You're smart, you'll seize the right opportunities. I was taken aback. This was the first time anyone had ever called me smart, and hearing it from a professor who had studied abroad, I was completely stunned. Just as I was about to respond, a knock sounded at the door. I frowned in confusion. Who else would be visiting on New Year's Eve? Then a familiar voice called from outside. Emma, it's me. I was shocked. Ryan Carter. Hadn't he already gone home? I couldn't help but glance at James Yeager. His face was unreadable, but for some reason, I got the distinct feeling that he wasn't in a particularly good mood. After a brief hesitation, I explained, It's probably my ex-husband. James continued handling the crabs, appearing calm and indifferent. He even let out a faint chuckle. Did you two plan to spend New Year's together? If so, I seem to be intruding. I quickly denied it. No, we're already divorced. How could we possibly have planned to celebrate together? I thought he had gone home. The knocking continued. I had no choice but to open the door. When I did, Ryan Carter stood outside, carrying bags of groceries. I had no intention of letting him in, so I blocked the doorway. Why are you here? He gave me a small smile. It's New Year's Eve. How could I let you spend it alone? I bought everything we need for dinner. Saying that, he made a move to step inside. I shifted slightly, blocking him. There's no need. We're divorced. It's best if we keep our distance. Ryan's face fell, looking visibly hurt. No matter what, we were family for so many years. It's a time for reunion. Why must you insist on being alone? You don't have to. Before he could finish, James's voice called out from inside. Emma, did you get any chili peppers? Without thinking, I replied, Yeah, they're in the basket. Then, turning back to Ryan, I noticed that his face had gone completely dark, his fists clenched, and he gritted his teeth. So you've got a man hiding in here. He looked furious, like a husband who had caught his wife in the act of cheating. I stared at him, completely baffled. Don't say such disgusting things. What do you mean by hiding a man? Everything here is out in the open. But Ryan had already lost his composure. He pushed forward, determined to get inside. Head. Before I could stop him, he had successfully shoved his way in. I sighed in frustration, shutting the door behind me. Inside, the atmosphere immediately turned tense. Or rather, Ryan was the only one treating it like a battlefield. James, on the other hand, remained completely at ease, continuing to cook in the kitchen. He wore a beige apron, moving effortlessly, looking for all the world like the man of the house. When he glanced at Ryan, he barely lifted an eyelid. I hurried over, stepping between them. Ryan, take your groceries and leave. James was an educated man, reserved and composed. He wasn't someone to get into petty conflicts. I was worried that Ryan would say something offensive and disrespect him, but my words only made Ryan even more furious. His expression twisted in disbelief. "You're kicking me out for another man?" I let out a sigh, exasperated. The standoff continued until James finally spoke. "If he's alone too, then let him stay," he said casually. "After all, you two do know each other." Hearing his words, I still felt reluctant, but I didn't want James to see me being petty, so I had no choice but to agree. "Fine, you can stay." Ryan looked frustrated beyond words. Maybe in his mind, no matter how much he had begged, I refused to let him stay, but the moment James said something, I immediately agreed. From his perspective, it must have looked like I cared about James more than him. But the truth was, that wasn't wrong. Ryan and I were divorced. I didn't owe him anything anymore. But James was different. I respected him. I didn't want to make things difficult for him. Naturally, whatever he said, I would go along with it. And so, New Year's Eve became a dinner for 3. I returned to the kitchen and turned to Ryan. "In the past, you always sat back and did nothing at home. But this isn't your home. If you're not going to help, you're not welcome here." I no longer felt the need to be considerate of our past. This was my home now. My rules applied here. As soon as I finished speaking, James chuckled lightly. "Then I suppose I should be glad I know how to cook. Otherwise, I'd be kicked out too." I quickly waved my hands. No, of course not. James had brought so much expensive seafood and delicacies, I wouldn't possibly drive him out. Ryan, who had been about to say something, nearly choked on his own breath. So the rule only applied to him. His eyes burned with silent outrage, as if he was on the verge of spitting blood. I remained calm and admitted it directly. Yes, the rule only applies to him. Ryan was clearly furious, but in the end, he still made his way to the kitchen and started washing vegetables. As he worked, he subtly probed for information and eventually figured out why James Yeager was here. After that, his expression seemed to improve slightly. Curious, I asked, "Why didn't you go home?" He glanced at me and said, "How could I leave, knowing you were here alone?" I let out a cold laugh. "As if you haven't left me alone before." Ryan's expression darkened. "When did I ever do that?" He sounded indignant, unwilling to accept my accusation. Thinking about the past, I couldn't help but feel bitter. For years, I had taken care of his parents, his siblings, his nephew, and our children. He was gone for most of the year, and maybe, in his mind, he believed his family had been keeping me company. But the reality was that I had been serving his entire family. I had been an orphan, but even so, I would have preferred to live alone rather than be trapped in that household. I fell silent. Perhaps noticing my shift in mood, Ryan furrowed his brows and, after a moment of hesitation, said, "I know I was often away for business, but at least there were people at home. With them around, you weren't completely alone." I couldn't stand his twisted version of events anymore. His ability to rewrite the past was truly shameless. "You should clarify something," I snapped. "Who was taking care of whom? I was the one looking after them. I did all the housework. When they were sick, I was the one taking care of them. What did they ever do for me?" Before Ryan could respond, James interjected smoothly, "If you had to serve an entire household, you probably didn't have much time to feel lonely." His words were like a sharp blade, cutting straight to the point. The anger I had been holding on to dissipated slightly, and despite myself, I let out a laugh. That's true. I was even busier than a farm animal. How would I have had the time to feel lonely? I hadn't expected James to be so blunt, but I appreciated his way of putting things into perspective. Ryan, on the other hand, was caught completely off guard. He hadn't expected me to have so many complaints bottled up. He tried to explain. I didn't mean it that way. Enough." I cut him off. "I don't want to hear it. This conversation is pointless." Despite the tension, dinner itself turned out to be quite good. At least the food was plentiful, and aside from Ryan occasionally saying something infuriating, things went smoothly. After the new year, Ryan still didn't leave. It seemed he had no intention of returning home anytime soon. A few days later, Mary also returned. When she saw Ryan still hanging around, she was visibly surprised. She knew all about our past and had no reason to be friendly toward him. She had also decided not to return to the factory. Instead, she stayed to start a business with me, something I was more than happy about, since I had been struggling to handle everything on my own. As our business gradually picked up, we rented a stall specifically for selling bags. Ryan, for some reason, seemed to have relocated his business to the same area. Every now and then, I'd catch him lingering nearby, but I couldn't be bothered to acknowledge him. One evening, as Mary and I were closing up shop, I spotted Ryan from a distance. He was standing with a young woman. As I walked closer, I suddenly recognized her. It was Linda. Her expression was one of sorrow, her eyes red as if she had been crying. But the moment she saw me, her entire demeanor changed. Shock flashed across her face. "Emma? What are you doing here?" She quickly walked up to me, scanning me from head to toe. Then, something flickered in her eyes, something sharp and resentful. She turned to Ryan, her tone accusatory. "So this is why you won't come home?" Her voice carried the righteous indignation of a wife catching her husband cheating. She spoke with so much confidence, as if she had every right to question him. Ryan seemed caught off guard, clearly at a loss for words. I instantly realized he had never told his family about our divorce. Linda looked heartbroken. She clenched her jaw, her voice trembling with resentment as she turned back to me. "You were the one who demanded a divorce," she said bitterly. "You left so coldly, and now you're here clinging to him? Do you want to reconcile?" My expression turned cold. I looked her directly in the eyes. "Oh?" I said, my tone laced with amusement. "Are you questioning me as Ryan's wife now? If not, then you're overstepping," I said coldly. Ryan also realized that Linda's words were out of line, and his expression darkened. He turned to her and said, "Linda, this is none of your business. I don't need to explain anything to you. I've already spoken to Mom and Dad." I had no patience to get entangled with the two of them any further, so I turned to leave. Seeing that I was about to go, Ryan quickly blocked my path, trying to explain. "I had no idea she would come looking for me. I didn't invite her here." Without hesitation, I shook off his hand. "I don't care about your business. I just want you and your family to stay away from me. Stop interfering in my life." Ryan looked at me helplessly. Mary, standing beside me, scoffed and pulled me away. The next day, Linda somehow found my stall. Her gaze was filled with a mix of jealousy and disdain. "Did you really think that just by messing around like this you could start making money like Ryan?" Having lived a second life, I could see right through her. Her every thought was written all over her face. She clearly assumed that Ryan was still financially supporting me, which made her feel both resentful and unwilling to accept reality. That was because, before the new year, Ryan had given me a bank book, one containing all the money he had earned over the past year. He told me that from now on, aside from necessary expenses for his parents and our children, every penny he made would go into that account, which was under my name. He even went as far as keeping detailed records of every expense, just so I wouldn't misunderstand. Even though I hadn't taken the money, he insisted on keeping it there and called it mine, saying he was just temporarily holding on to it. Naturally, this had affected Linda's spending. Now that she lived in the city, temptation was everywhere: shops, restaurants, and luxuries she had never been able to afford before. Her salary from working in the cafeteria was barely enough. In the past, Ryan had secretly given her money and occasionally bought her expensive gifts, allowing her to flaunt them in front of her colleagues and neighbors. But now, with Ryan staying in town and not returning home, she no longer had access to those benefits. And since his parents were notoriously stingy, they wouldn't give her any extra money either. I figured that must have been why she had come all the way to Jishi, to confront Ryan and reclaim her previous status. But I had no intention of explaining anything to her. Her assumptions had nothing to do with me. Instead, I casually grabbed a broom and started sweeping the ground in front of her, intentionally sweeping dust toward her shoes. "Move aside. Can't you see I'm running a business? Why are you just standing here?" Linda coughed and quickly stepped away, glaring at me, but in the end, she stomped her foot angrily and left. Or so I thought. That night, she showed up again with Ryan. Mary rolled her eyes dramatically. Why won't she just disappear?" Linda looked like she was about to argue back, but the moment she saw Ryan, she immediately quieted down and obediently stood behind him. Ryan had come to help me transport goods. Today was our scheduled pickup from the factory. Our business had grown significantly, and demand had increased. Even if Mary and I worked until our sewing machines overheated, we still couldn't keep up. So we had signed a contract with a factory to mass-produce our designs. Today was the day to pick up our order. Usually, it was just Mary and me handling this. Last time, Jack happened to visit and helped out, which had made the process much faster. But today, Jack had exams and couldn't make it. With just the two of us, we would have needed at least 2 or 3 trips to transport everything. When Ryan heard about this, he immediately volunteered to help. He even complained, saying, "Why are you relying on outsiders but not asking me for help? We were married for years. There's no need to be so distant." I thought about everything he owed me in the past. Since free labor was free labor, I saw no reason to refuse. So I agreed. What I hadn't expected was that Linda would show up too. But since she was already here, I didn't care about her reasons. She wasn't going to just stand around and watch. More people meant faster work, after all. And so I led the whole group to the factory. Upon arriving, Linda's eyes widened in awe. The factory was nothing like the ones back in our hometown. The size, the structure, it was all on a different level. For a moment, I could see the undisguised envy in her expression. But before she could admire it for too long, reality hit. She actually had to work. "What are you standing there for?" I said, glancing at her. "Start moving boxes." She hesitated, clearly unwilling. But when she saw Ryan also carrying load after load, she had no choice but to reluctantly pick up a few boxes herself. Within minutes, she was already exhausted. I could tell she was thinking about pulling one of her old tricks again. Linda clutched her chest dramatically, letting out exaggerated breaths as if she was about to collapse. I immediately turned to Ryan. "Your dear sister-in-law is sick again. You should hurry up and buy her a ticket home." The moment Linda heard this, she stopped, gasping before Ryan could even look her way. I knew how much effort it had taken for her to come here. She wouldn't leave so easily. Seeing Ryan's questioning gaze, she quickly straightened up and said, "I'm fine. I can handle it." Then, without another word, she grabbed a large bag and walked toward the tricycle. Watching this, I couldn't help but chuckle. After the first trip, I had Mary and Ryan take the goods back, while Linda and I stayed behind to continue loading. After a while, we both sat down on the steps to rest. Linda, clearly unused to manual labor, was panting heavily, completely out of breath. She glared at me. "You're doing this on purpose, aren't you?" I raised an eyebrow, unconcerned. "So what if I am? Are you going to run to Ryan and complain?" My indifference nearly made her explode with frustration. Just as she was about to retort, a shadow fell over me. Thinking Mary and Ryan had returned, I got up, but when I looked up, I saw someone completely unexpected. "James, what are you doing here?" I stood up in surprise. He had clearly rushed over. His breathing was still uneven. "I heard from Jack that today was your pickup day. He couldn't come, so since I was free, I thought I'd help." I felt a little embarrassed. "There's no need. We can handle it ourselves. Besides, you're a professor. How could you do this kind of manual labor? It's dirty and exhausting. You'll ruin your clothes." As soon as I finished speaking, I noticed Ryan had arrived, standing just behind us. He had clearly overheard everything. His expression was dark, his jaw clenched. He was probably thinking, "Why is she worried about James doing heavy labor, but never cared when I did it?" But James wasn't the same as him. He was a highly educated scholar who had studied abroad. I couldn't just casually ask him for help. Jack was different. I saw him as a kid who just wanted to help me out of gratitude. I could invite Jack for a meal as thanks, but if James helped, how would I ever repay him? Ryan rolled up his sleeves, picked up 2 heavy bags, and tossed them onto the tricycle. Then he turned to James with a challenging smirk. "Professor Yeager, you're too delicate for this kind of work. Better not get in the way." I was about to snap back at Ryan. His words were far too rude. But James stopped me, lightly resting his hand on my arm. He ignored Ryan's provocation and simply smiled at me. "I'm already here. Let me help." Since he had said that, I couldn't refuse anymore. And just like that, we had one more person helping out. Linda, on the other hand, kept trying to find an excuse to avoid work. She kept sneaking glances at James, but I saw right through her. I knew she wouldn't say anything good, so I didn't give her the chance to speak. With more hands on deck, we finished loading quickly. After returning home, everyone washed up and tidied themselves. I grabbed a new towel and handed it to James. He took it with a smile. "Thanks." "I should be the one thanking you," I said sincerely. James didn't look like someone used to manual labor, yet he had surprising strength and endurance. He carried heavy loads without breaking a sweat. He had helped me a lot today. After using the towel, he washed it himself and neatly hung it back up to dry. "If you ever need help again, just call me," he said, his gaze unwavering. "For anything." The intensity in his direct stare made my heart race. I nodded absent-mindedly. Just then, Ryan entered the courtyard, only to see me and James standing together. He immediately pushed forward, forcing himself between us. I didn't bother lingering any longer. I turned and went inside. Mary and I had already planned to cook a meal to thank everyone. Everyone stayed for dinner. James, as if he was used to being here, naturally went into the kitchen to help. Seeing this, Ryan refused to be outdone and joined in as well. Seeing that everyone had gone into the kitchen, Linda had no choice but to help out as well. Dinner was prepared quickly, but despite the extra company, James showed no curiosity about Linda at all. On the other hand, Linda couldn't stop talking, even while eating. "So this gentleman here is a scholar?" she asked, her tone exaggerated. "Did he go to college?" Mary scoffed, rolling her eyes. "James studied abroad. He's now a university professor." Linda's eyes flickered, and she gasped in mock amazement. "Wow, Professor Yeager, that's incredible. I've never spoken to someone who studied overseas before." Then she glanced at me and smirked. "But wouldn't that make conversations between you two difficult, Professor Yeager? I mean, Emma didn't even finish elementary school. You two must have nothing in common." Mary immediately caught on to her malicious intent. She wasn't just bringing up my lack of education, she was also deliberately mentioning my past marriage to Ryan, as if James didn't already know. Mary was about to snap back, but before she could, James spoke first. "Understanding between people has nothing to do with education," he said calmly, "and certainly nothing to do with the past. What matters is the person themselves." His tone was neutral. Yet there was an undeniable warmth and steadiness to it, a kind of quiet strength that put people at ease. I looked up at him, and at that moment, he was already looking at me. His gaze was too intense, almost burning. Feeling flustered, I quickly lowered my head and focused on eating. After dinner, I saw everyone off. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't help but think of James. I wasn't some naive girl unfamiliar with the world. I could clearly sense that James treated me differently. But at this point in my life, I didn't have the luxury of entertaining such thoughts. I closed my eyes and forced myself to stop overthinking. Forget it. If I couldn't reciprocate his feelings, I shouldn't waste his time either. I should just keep my distance. However, no matter how much I tried to avoid James, even going as far as seeing Jack less often, James started appearing around me more frequently. As our sales continued to rise, I shared my next goal with Mary. "I want to create our own brand," I told her. "Not just selling at a market stall, we need to get into shopping malls and establish a name for ourselves." Mary immediately agreed. "I trust your judgment. Let's do it." Without hesitation, I began registering our brand and handling all the necessary paperwork. Finally, we chose an auspicious date to officially launch. On opening day, both James and Ryan showed up. Jack was there too. They all insisted on coming, and I didn't stop them. After all, it was a celebratory day, and having more people around made things livelier. But the tension between Ryan and James was almost tangible. It was impossible not to notice. I hesitated, but in the end, pretended I didn't see anything. The first day of business went better than expected. Customers came in one after another. By the time we wrapped up for the day, Mary suggested a hot pot dinner at my place. Everyone agreed enthusiastically. Just as we finished preparing the meal, Linda suddenly showed up. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked at Ryan pitifully. "Ryan, you told me you had something important to do today, so you left me alone at home," she said, her voice trembling. "But you were actually here with Emma?" She glanced around and took in the lively atmosphere of the courtyard. Her expression twisted in frustration. Then she demanded, "Ryan, just come home with me. You've been gone for over a year. We all miss you." Ryan immediately looked at me, as if waiting for my reaction. Seeing my completely indifferent expression, he quickly turned back to Linda and said, "Go home. Don't make a scene here." But Linda refused to leave. Ryan rubbed his temples, clearly getting a headache from the situation. Just then, Jack suddenly spoke up, looking puzzled. "Wait, who is this lady?" he asked innocently. "I've been meaning to ask, is she Ryan's new wife?" His words landed like a bomb. Linda's face turned bright red, and she looked at Ryan shyly as if she had just been exposed. Meanwhile, Ryan's expression darkened instantly. He shot Jack a sharp glare. "Don't talk nonsense." "This is my sister-in-law," Ryan said stiffly. Jack refused to back down. "How am I making things up? Look at the way she acts around you. Anyone would think you two are married. And now you're saying she's just your sister-in-law? Don't tell me you've always treated each other this way." Wow, that's really something. Jack was young and impulsive. He couldn't hold back his words. He said exactly what was on his mind, causing both Ryan and Linda's faces to darken. Mary, enjoying the show, added sarcastically. And that's not even the worst of it. When Ryan was still married, he let his dear sister-in-law live in the house in the city while leaving his wife and kids back in the countryside. Oh, and let's not forget, he even gave up his wife's job opportunity for her. Anything good in his life? Straight to her. Meanwhile, his actual wife and children had to survive on scraps. Jack looked at me with sympathy, then turned his furious gaze toward Ryan. Ryan tried to explain. There were reasons for all that. I just felt that, as her brother-in-law, it was my duty to take care of her. Mary immediately shot back. Oh, so that's why you bought her a fancy watch and a cashmere coat while your wife didn't even get a new dress for the new year? Jack's jaw dropped. What? Who's the actual wife here? If my dad had ever done something like that, my mom would have divorced him on the spot. Then he turned to me, shaking his head. Emma, you were right to leave. But honestly, you put up with way too much. How could you stand it for so long? They were practically conspiring against you. I smiled bitterly. The real tragedy was that in my past life, I never even got the chance to leave, not even before I died. I was just lucky to get a second chance. Ryan's guilt-ridden expression was evident as he looked at me. He had built a perfect reputation for himself as a selfless brother, but the truth was, it was me who suffered for it. Linda, seeing herself cornered by everyone, quickly fought back. Holding back tears, she wiped her eyes delicately and said, I lost my husband years ago. Ryan was only looking after me out of pity. Why twist things into something ugly? She then looked at me with clear accusation in her eyes. Could it be that someone is deliberately bad-mouthing me behind my back, trying to turn people against Ryan? Mary snorted and slammed her hand on the table. You? Who the hell do you think you are? You don't need anyone to badmouth you. I'll say it straight to your face. You and Ryan both are terrible people for how you treated Emma all these years. Ryan flinched. Mary was livid, her hands shaking with anger. I gently tugged her sleeve to calm her down, then turned to Ryan with an icy expression. I've said everything I needed to say about the past, I said. I don't want to repeat myself, and I don't want to hear your excuses. From now on, stay away from me, both you and Linda. You're not welcome here. Now leave. Ryan's lips moved slightly, as if he wanted to say something. Linda, seeing my complete lack of patience, grabbed Ryan's arm and tried to drag him away. Ryan, don't you see? Emma has moved on to another man, she sneered. She doesn't need you anymore. Let her be someone else's discarded leftovers. The moment those words left her mouth, I stood up and walked straight toward her. Slap. The force of the slap echoed through the room. I had tried to ignore her, but she kept pushing. And what's worse, she was clearly insulting James. My issues with Ryan had nothing to do with James, and I refused to let him get dragged into this mess because of me. He didn't deserve that. Linda stood there, stunned, holding her cheek. She blinked in disbelief as if she never expected me to actually hit her. Then tears started streaming down her face. She raised her hand, clearly intending to hit me back. Before she could, Ryan grabbed her wrist and shoved her aside. Linda stared at him in shock. Ryan, you saw that, didn't you? She hit me. Ryan's expression was dark and unreadable. You crossed the line. You deserved it. Linda couldn't believe her ears. I had no interest in wasting another second on them. I don't want to hear another word, I said coldly. Both of you, get out. And if you ever come near my house again, I won't be so polite next time. Ryan stood at the door, looking at me in pain. I'm sorry, he murmured. I didn't respond. I simply closed the door in his face. When I turned around, I saw everyone staring at me, their expressions complicated. I let out a small laugh. Sorry for ruining the mood, I said, returning to my seat and urging everyone to continue eating. James didn't offer any comforting words. Instead, he silently placed a piece of fish, my favorite, into my bowl. I murmured a quiet, thank you. After dinner, I walked them all to the courtyard. James looked at me as if he wanted to say something, but ultimately remained silent. I avoided his gaze and simply said goodbye. For a long time after that, James continued to appear from time to time. He always helped me in subtle ways, never making it feel like a burden, yet making his presence known. If I ever said I felt bad about troubling him, he would look at me with an innocent expression and say, if you feel bad, just invite me over for a meal. It's just dinner. Of course, I couldn't refuse something so simple. Over time, he started coming to my house more frequently. He never overstepped his boundaries, yet somehow, without me realizing it, he gradually became a part of my life. As for Ryan, after that disastrous night, he disappeared for a while. When he finally returned 2 weeks later, he looked exhausted, as if he had been running around non-stop. "I sent Linda back to the countryside," he told me. "She won't be bothering you anymore." He hesitated, then continued, "I've been thinking a lot about what Jack said that night. I never realized that the way I treated Linda looked so strange, so inappropriate to outsiders. I'm sorry. I truly regret it." His voice was heavy with guilt. "I moved my parents and the kids to the city. They're living in that apartment now." I raised an eyebrow. That caught me by surprise. The apartment wasn't big, just a 2-bedroom unit, barely over 500 square feet. Now it housed 3 adults and 3 kids. I couldn't imagine how cramped it must have been. Ryan went on, "But for now, Hayden and Sean can only attend a migrant school. I'll figure out a way to transfer them to Tyler's school." Hearing him mention the boys stirred no emotion in me. Getting into a good school in the city wasn't easy. There was a decent elementary school near the apartment, but spots were limited. Tyler had already taken one of those spots, so Hayden and Sean couldn't get in. The migrant school they were attending now was poorly managed, with low-quality education. Those two had never been disciplined, and with their grandparents spoiling them, I doubted they'd even make it through the mandatory education system. But none of that was my concern anymore. In my past life, I had done everything I could for them. I had nothing left to give. Ryan seemed to sense my indifference. He opened his mouth as if to say more, but I coldly cut him off. "I told you not to bother me again." With that, I turned and went back into the store. As my business grew, I started considering acquiring a small factory. With increasing demand, having my own production site would make things much more efficient. Soon, I found a struggling garment factory that was about to shut down. The space wasn't huge, but it had all the equipment and workers I needed. It was a perfect fit. Without hesitation, I took it over. The business flourished. By the end of the year, we opened our 3rd store. One afternoon, while Mary and I were working in the shop, she suddenly nudged my arm. I looked at her in confusion, and she motioned toward the entrance with her chin. Outside, employees were unloading stock, and among them was Ryan, silently helping carry the goods. I had told him to stop lingering around me, so he didn't dare approach me directly. Instead, he just quietly helped out in the background. Mary smirked. "I heard his business is doing well too. And yet, he still has time to come here and play the devoted ex-husband." She hesitated for a moment, then looked at me seriously. "Be honest with me, Emma. Do you think there's any chance you and Ryan could get back together? He really has changed." Without a second thought, I replied, "No chance." Glancing at Ryan still moving boxes, I sneered. "Men are always like this. They take care of outsiders, but the moment you take them back, they go right back to treating you like an afterthought." Mary thought about it and nodded. "That's true." Then she grinned mischievously. "And what about Professor James?" My pen paused mid-calculation. "Don't talk nonsense, he's just a good person." Mary giggled, giving me a knowing look. "Oh, come on, he's made it very obvious. You can't just pretend not to notice." Her teasing made my face heat up slightly, but I ignored her and focused on my paperwork. That evening, as we were closing the store, Ryan stood at a distance watching me. He seemed like he wanted to approach but hesitated. Just as he finally turned to leave, a woman and 2 children appeared out of nowhere, heading straight for him. Linda had brought Hayden and Sean to the city. The 2 boys froze for a moment when they saw me. Then, in the next second, they ran toward me, grabbing my legs and bursting into tears. Ryan looked just as shocked as I was. Once everyone calmed down, I finally got the full story. Apparently, Linda had reached her breaking point. That apartment, once a symbol of privilege, had now become her worst nightmare. Every day, she came home to chaos, the house constantly filled with the noise of children arguing and crying. She had to wake up at dawn to commute to the town's cafeteria for work, barely making ends meet. She was already exhausted from her job, yet after work, she still had to take care of 3 kids and 2 elderly parents in that cramped space. She had nowhere to escape. But the final straw? Hayden and Sean had started to realize the unfairness of their situation. They were growing up, and they finally understood the difference between their school and Tyler's. Their school was run down, far away, and poorly funded. Meanwhile, Tyler's school was brand new, clean, and modern. For the first time, they felt cheated. And now they wanted justice. They demanded to be transferred to Tyler's school. And if they couldn't go, then Tyler shouldn't be allowed to either. Linda had been spoiling them for years, letting them get away with everything. Now, she was reaping what she had sown. Once the chaos began, no one could control it. Tyler couldn't even concentrate on his homework when he got home. After listening to Linda's complaints, I took a good look at her. She really did seem much older now. The fashionable clothes she used to wear were gone, probably because she no longer had the extra money or time to dress up. Her eyes were full of resentment as she looked at me. I knew she still hated me for turning Hayden and Sean against her and her son. Finally, she couldn't hold it in anymore. You're living a lavish life here in the city, eating well and dressing beautifully. Why should I be the one raising your kids? I corrected her immediately. About the children, Ryan and I already agreed. He would have full custody. If I remember correctly, he sends money home every month. It should be more than enough to support them. So you're not raising them for me. You're raising them for your dear brother. After the divorce, Ryan and I had discussed the issue of the kids. If he felt that raising them alone was unfair, we could each take one. But I knew his parents would never let me take them. In their eyes, boys were the bloodline of the Carter family, and there was no way they would give them to me. So Ryan and I signed an agreement. He had full custody, and he was solely responsible for their upbringing. I paused and then curled my lips into a mocking smile. Besides, your brother spent years raising your son. You've only taken care of Hayden and Sean for a few months, and you're already complaining? Linda was startled and quickly denied it. No, that's not it. It's just that the kids miss their mom. That's why I brought them here. I glanced at the two boys. Their faces were expressionless. Miss me? That's highly unlikely. When they first saw me, they clung to me, crying as if they were heartbroken. But their words were full of complaints. One moment cursing Linda, the next cursing Tyler, demanding that I set things right and kick Tyler out of school. I knew they didn't miss me. They just needed me right now. Maybe Linda had told Ryan's parents that I was doing well in business. And maybe those old folks had instructed the boys to come and get money from me. Because as soon as they calmed down, they started demanding money. Mom, we're your sons. You can't be heartless to us. You have to give us all your money. If you don't, when you're old, we'll leave you on the streets. The more they talked, the more outrageous they became. The words sounded all too familiar. I didn't even have to guess. I knew Ryan's parents had put them up to this. Ryan's face darkened when he heard them. He stood up and slapped both of them across the face. Shut up, he roared. She's your mother. Who told you that you could threaten her? The two boys, still defiant, shouted back. Grandpa and Grandma said so. If she doesn't give us money when she's old, we'll throw her out. Ryan was furious. He turned them around and smacked them hard on their backsides. The boys wailed loudly. The whole scene was loud and chaotic. I found it boring and meaningless. I felt nothing, not sadness, not anger. I had long known what kind of people those boys were. Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving them to deal with their own family drama. I had stopped caring about the Carter family. I had too much on my plate. The factory was newly acquired, and I had a lot of work to do. One day, Ryan came looking for me again. He looked even older than before. That surprised me a little. In my past life, even when he reached middle age, he had still been charming and charismatic. But now, he seemed like a different person. He looked at me for a long time, unable to speak. When I turned to leave, he finally said, "I'm sending the kids back tomorrow." He hesitated. I'm sorry for what they said that day. Maybe he had finally realized how much his parents had poisoned their minds. Maybe hearing it with his own ears had shaken him to his core. I smiled indifferently. No need to apologize. We had barely exchanged a few words when Linda arrived, her face full of hostility and bitterness. You're truly heartless, she sneered. Even a tiger doesn't eat its own cubs. You won't even give money to your own children? Ah, so this was what she really came for. Money. I wondered if the money would actually be spent on the kids. Probably not. Her accusations didn't affect me in the slightest, but Ryan was the one who snapped first. Enough, he barked. I'll take care of my sons. That was our agreement. I'm not incapable of supporting them, I said flatly. Our family matters are none of your business. Linda looked wounded, but had no choice but to hold it in. Just then, the owner of the neighboring shop came over with a delivery and called me over. Didn't you say you wanted a scarf? We finally have it in stock. The store next door sold imported hats and scarves. I had seen a scarf I liked in a magazine, but it had been out of stock for a while. Hearing that it was finally available, I immediately followed him over. After paying for it, I noticed Linda had also followed me. Her eyes lit up as she stared at the scarves on display. The moment she saw me paying so effortlessly, her gaze darkened with jealousy. Then, suddenly, she turned around and put on a pitiful expression. She looked at Ryan and immediately leaned against him slightly. "Ryan, my birthday is coming up," she said sweetly. "Can you buy me a scarf? I've been trying to save money, so I don't even take the bus to work. I ride my bike back and forth to town every day, freezing the whole way. Every time I shiver from the cold." She was playing the victim again. In the past, whenever she did this, Ryan would always give in. Even though he had stopped being so generous with her recently, Linda figured that was only because she wasn't around him as much. So this time, she was full of confidence, already eyeing the scarves, probably imagining which one she would pick. But Ryan didn't give her what she wanted. Instead, he said, "All my money is with Emma. I don't have any." Linda's expression instantly collapsed. She stared at him in disbelief, repeating, "Your money is with Emma? Have you lost your mind? You're already divorced." Ryan's face darkened immediately. He hated when people brought up the divorce. "This is what I owe her," he said coldly. "I willingly gave it to her." Linda nearly exploded on the spot. I, on the other hand, was getting annoyed just listening to them. I crossed my arms and said, "Ryan, if you two want to flirt and argue, take it outside. Don't disrupt business here. And for the record, I never asked for your money. What you do with it is your problem. Just don't drag me into it." That little scene ended in an unpleasant mess. Shortly after, Ryan disappeared for a while. It turned out he had sent Linda and the kids back home, and then returned alone. He was determined to stay in the city, even though I told him repeatedly that we would never get back together. Still, he refused to leave. His business wasn't even well suited for this area. But that was his problem, not mine. Since he insisted on staying, I had no reason to interfere. Another year passed. Our business continued to grow exponentially. With the new year, our brand finally expanded beyond the province, starting to establish a nationwide presence. By now, our brand name was well known. Mary had also found someone to spend her life with, and the two had officially gotten married. We bought houses in the same villa neighborhood, staying neighbors as always. What I hadn't expected was that James also moved there. With that, seeing him became even more convenient. He often came over to cook for me, using the excuse that I was too busy with work to eat properly. At Mary's wedding, James and I both attended. After the ceremony, we took a walk along a quiet summer path. This season, the mosquitoes were terrible, and unfortunately, I was the type to attract them. I had forgotten to bring insect repellent today, and just as I was thinking about it, James took a small bottle out of his pocket and handed it to me. I looked at the bottle in my palm, momentarily stunned. He smiled lightly. "You always attract mosquitoes, and you always forget to bring repellent. For the mosquitoes, following you must feel like a never-ending feast." I couldn't help but laugh. I applied the repellent to my exposed arms and neck. A cool, refreshing scent spread through the air. It dawned on me. James had always remembered my little habits. Whenever I was busy and forgot something, he would silently take care of it. His kindness was never overwhelming. It was subtle, gentle, like rain soaking into the earth. I curved my lips into a soft smile and handed the repellent back to him. James didn't take it. "You should keep it," he said casually. "I don't need it anyway." I insisted, pushing it back into his hands. "You keep it. I'll just borrow it from you whenever I need it." James looked at me, a little surprised. For a brief moment, he seemed stunned. Then, suddenly, a light flickered in his eyes. I smirked. "What's wrong? You don't want to hold on to it for me?" "I do," James blurted out. The joy in his eyes was undeniable. "I do," James said. "I'm more than willing to let you leave your things with me, to have you come find me whenever you need them." He understood what it meant. It was my way of silently accepting that he would always be by my side. His excitement was clear, and I couldn't help but smile as well. I continued walking forward, and he quickly caught up, walking beside me. The hand closest to mine trembled slightly. At first, it was a tentative move, testing the waters. When he realized I wasn't resisting, he firmly took my hand in his. After a long silence, he suddenly spoke. "Emma." "Huh?" He let out a soft chuckle, then called me again. "Emma, I really like you." His voice was gentle, yet filled with certainty. Emma, I must be the luckiest person in the world right now. My face grew warm. I couldn't help but tease. Aren't you a little too old to be this cheesy? I never thought someone as composed and serious as Professor James could have such a moment. But I liked hearing it. I squeezed his hand in response. Under the moonlight, our shadows stretched long across the pavement, leaning against each other. That perfect, peaceful moment shattered the moment we saw Ryan standing outside the neighborhood. At first, he looked calm, but the moment he saw James and me holding hands, his face darkened instantly. I had no intention of hiding. Both James and I were single. Our relationship was nobody's business. But I hadn't expected Ryan to lose control. With a stormy expression, he strode toward us, and in the next second, his fist landed squarely on James's face. James immediately fought back. I gasped, nearly screaming his name. Ryan, what the hell are you doing? I rushed forward to pull them apart, but they were locked in a brutal fight, exchanging blow after blow. James looked like a refined scholar, but his punches were anything but weak. Before long, Ryan was knocked to the ground, receiving several solid hits. But in the next moment, he managed to pin James down. Just as Ryan's fist was about to strike James's face again, I pushed him off with all my strength. Caught off guard, he stumbled backward and fell to the ground. I immediately knelt beside James, checking him in concern. Are you okay? I'm fine, he reassured me with a warm smile. This is nothing. But my heart ached at the sight of the bruise forming at the corner of his lips. I turned to Ryan, anger surging inside me. Ryan had stood up, but before he could say anything, I strode up to him and slapped him. The sharp crack echoed in the night. His face froze in shock. Then, without hesitation, I slapped him a second time. The first slap, I said coldly, is because you had no right to hit James. The second slap is for everything you owe me, for all these years, for the way you've tormented me even after our divorce. Seeing you pretend to be remorseful disgusts me. My fury was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Ryan stood there, stunned, his face bruised, blood trickling from his lip. He didn't even react. James stepped beside me, his arm gently wrapping around my shoulders. Ryan's eyes reddened. He opened his mouth, his voice trembling. Emma, I'm sorry. Everything was my fault. It doesn't matter anymore, I cut him off sharply. Now leave, and if this ever happens again, I will call the police. Without another word, I took James's hand and led him inside. As we walked away, Ryan remained standing in place, motionless. When we got home, I pulled out the first aid kit and carefully applied medicine to James's wounds. Even though he didn't show any sign of pain, my heart still ached for him. I'm sorry, I whispered. Before I could say more, he gently covered my lips with his fingers. There's no need for apologies between us, he said softly. His hand moved to cup my face, his thumb lightly tracing my cheek. If taking a few punches means he'll finally stop bothering you, then I'd say it was worth it. Seeing that he still had the energy to joke, the weight in my chest finally lifted a little. I took his hand in mine. After that night, Ryan finally disappeared from my life. When Mary found out about my relationship with James, she wasn't surprised at all. I knew it, she exclaimed. The first time I saw James looking at you and the way you kept avoiding him, I knew you two had feelings for each other. I was a little taken aback. Was I really that obvious? I had always thought I kept my distance, but maybe, deep down, I had always liked him. I just had too many things weighing on my mind. Zach and I instinctively avoided him. I hadn't expected that, after all these years, we would still end up together. When James's nephew, Jack, found out, he was completely shocked. Jack had always been a bit oblivious when it came to matters of the heart. He completely failed to notice the unusual atmosphere between James and me. He was happy for us, but also a bit conflicted. If you and Uncle James are together now, does that mean I can't call you Emma anymore? Won't that mess up our family hierarchy? He let out a dramatic sigh. It's going to take some getting used to. I chuckled. You can call me whatever you want. No rush to change it. You've been calling me Emma for years. It's probably not that easy to switch all of a sudden. To me, it was just a title, nothing to make a fuss over. James, however, cleared his throat meaningfully, his gaze toward Jack carrying a subtle warning. Jack instantly straightened up and corrected himself. Aunt Emma. His comically fast change in attitude made both James and me burst into laughter. That fall, James and I had our wedding. It was held in Jishi, and nearly all of the Jiang family attended. The Jiang family was full of kind-hearted, well-educated people, always supportive and united. It was the kind of warm, loving family environment I had once longed for but never had. During the wedding, I received an unexpected gift. A bank book from Ryan. All the money he had earned over the years was in it. He said it was both compensation for the past and his wedding gift to me. "If you accept it," he said, "then let's consider everything settled. No debts left between us, no need to ever see each other again." In the end, I took it. It was my way of completely closing the chapter on my past. James supported my decision. After our wedding, James and I continued living in Jishi. That year, I made the decision to expand my brand internationally. We had seized the right opportunities at the right time, and before long, our brand became a leading name in casual bags and accessories, gaining global recognition. Another year passed. Our daughter had started elementary school. James, now the dean of his department, had fewer teaching hours and spent more time at home with our child. Because my work kept me busy, he took on more responsibilities at home, something I was deeply grateful for. He once told me, "You are a bird meant to soar freely. As long as you're willing to rest by my side when you're tired, even if only briefly, I'll be content." Hearing that, I only became more determined not to let him feel neglected. Whenever I wasn't traveling for work, I made sure to spend time at home. Even something as simple as building blocks together as a family felt like the most precious, peaceful time. Another winter came. That day, I saw two familiar faces I hadn't seen in years, Ethan and Eric. Now grown men, neither of them was married yet. I immediately knew why they had come. Years ago, after the financial crisis, Ryan's business collapsed completely. In the end, he couldn't keep going and returned to our hometown. Now, they had probably burned through what little family savings were left and were coming to ask me for money. I listened to their sob story with little interest. "Mom, we know you went through a lot back then," Ethan said, "and we understand why you didn't take care of us all these years. We don't blame you." "Yeah, Mom," Eric added. "Dad was tricked back then, caught up in that woman's sob stories. He made mistakes. We all know that now." "Exactly." Ethan nodded. "She played the victim and manipulated him into giving her everything, the house, the money. Because of her, we lost our chance to go to a good school, and that ruined everything." Neither of them had made it to college. Ryan had managed to enroll them in a vocational school, hoping they'd learn a trade. But they had always been too ambitious for their own good, unwilling to start small. In the end, they learned nothing. Even when Ryan tried teaching them business, they lacked patience, spending all their time partying and wasting money instead. I listened, letting their words go in one ear and out the other. I knew exactly what kind of people they were. To them, money was the only thing that mattered. They had never cared about me as their mother. In my past life, Ryan had been wealthy, and with his support, Linda had started her own business. Meanwhile, I had been a powerless housewife, so they waited for me to die. I was useless to them. But in this life, Ryan had gone bankrupt. With nothing left to gain, Linda had remarried. But by then, she was no longer young and had no career prospects, so she couldn't marry well. From what Mary told me, that marriage also ended in divorce. She wanted to move back into Ryan's house, but his parents refused. They hadn't wanted her to remarry in the first place, and now that she had failed again, they wanted nothing to do with her. With nowhere to go, she made a scene at Ryan's house. Her tantrums were so bad that Ryan's father suffered a stroke and became paralyzed, while his mother had a cerebral hemorrhage, leaving her face partially paralyzed. The entire family was in chaos. In the end, Linda was kicked out. Now, with the family completely ruined, only one run-down apartment remained. The entire family was crammed into that tiny space. And now, Ethan and Eric wanted to get married. But how could they get married when they didn't even have a place to live? Of course, they needed to buy a new house. But since they had no concept of saving money, they spent every cent they made. So now, they were completely broke. And naturally, they thought of their wealthy biological mother, me. I didn't waste my breath arguing. I simply took out the custody agreement Ryan and I had signed back then and showed it to them. The agreement clearly stated that both children belonged to the Carter family and would always be under their care. I had no legal obligation to support them. I had run out of patience and had them thrown out. Even though the agreement was clear, I had still paid for their vocational schooling back then, just to avoid any future legal disputes. That meant that even if they tried to sue me, I had already fulfilled my legal obligations to them while they were minors. And now, All my assets had long been transferred to my daughter's name. There was nothing left for them to take advantage of. Besides, they were grown adults now, perfectly capable of supporting themselves. To avoid further trouble, I did something I hadn't done in over a decade. I reached out to Ryan. I told him about Ethan and Eric showing up, making it clear that none of them should ever come near me again. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so civil next time. My connection to those two boys had long since been severed. Ryan simply replied, "Got it." After that, they never came back. 20 years passed. James and I had aged gracefully, our faces now carrying the marks of time. Our daughter had grown into a strong, capable woman and had successfully taken over my business. With everything in place, James and I finally retired and began our long-awaited life of leisure. Ryan's ending, side story. Ryan, now old and frail, lay in bed, listening to the shouting outside. Linda and Ethan were at it again. Even at his age, he still had no stable place to live. Now, they were fighting over this house again. Linda insisted that half of the house belonged to her, so she had the right to live there. Ethan and Eric, of course, disagreed. Now that their grandparents were dead, the house finally felt spacious for them. There was no way they were letting anyone else move in. They were just waiting for Ryan to die, then the house would be even more comfortable. Maybe, just maybe, with a bigger space, they could finally get married. After Linda was finally kicked out, Ethan and Eric stormed into Ryan's room, furious. "You old bastard," Ethan spat. "This was supposed to be our house. But no, you just had to give it to that bitch. You let her live here for so many years while we were stuck in the countryside. You disgust me. You were so desperate to please her that you didn't even care about your own family. Mom was heartbroken because of you." Eric added, "You abandoned us for that woman." Years ago, they had considered reaching out to their mother, but Ryan had stopped them. By the time they were old enough to ignore him, it was already too late. Their mother had become a completely different class of person. They couldn't even get close to her anymore. Then, someone else warned them, if they caused trouble, even the small life they had now would be taken away. So they shamefully retreated, giving up on the idea. Now, looking at the frail, dying Ryan, resentment burned in their eyes. This old fool had ruined everything. Ryan wanted to defend himself, to say that he never had feelings for Linda, that he wasn't blinded by lust. But he didn't have the strength to speak, because he hadn't eaten in 2 days. And really, what was the point? Everyone had already decided that he had always preferred Linda over his own wife and children. Ethan and Eric glared at him, their voices filled with hatred and cruelty. "Hurry up and drop dead already, old man. Do us all a favor." After they left, Ryan's vision blurred. He knew the end was near. His mind drifted back to the past. Like an outsider, he watched himself, watched Emma suffer all those years. And suddenly, he realized the truth. She had been right all along. His children had been right all along. He had been a complete fool. His wife and kids had struggled to afford meat, while he bought Linda an expensive watch. His wife had to walk everywhere, while he gave his bicycle to Linda. His sons studied in a rundown school, while Linda's kid attended a bright, spacious school in the city. He had done all of that. He had destroyed his own family. But Emma never divorced him. She had taken their children to the city, ensuring they got a good education and a better life. She had built a thriving business and secured their future. She had won. Ryan thought it was just a dream, a beautiful fantasy before death. But then he saw something that shattered him completely. He saw his sons, now grown men, standing over a dying Emma in a hospital bed, and the cruel, heartless words they spoke to her. "You're finally dying, huh? Took you long enough." Ryan screamed at them. "Shut up, apologize to her." But they couldn't hear him. No one could. Then, Emma slowly closed her eyes for the last time. Ryan broke down, sobbing uncontrollably, and at that moment he finally understood. He finally understood why Emma had to leave him, why she had become cold toward their children, because he had destroyed everything, because he deserved to die alone. With overwhelming regret crushing him, Ryan closed his eyes forever.